If you work for the Catholic Church and want to avoid burnout, overcome team dysfunctions, and put more souls in the pews, we're here to help. I'm Ty Hua with John Kahns, my co-host, and this is the Catholic Ministry Professionals Podcast. The show provides leadership development for Catholic churches. Every week, you can expect engaging discussions, expert interviews, and actionable advice to help you move Jesus' mission forward in your parish. Today, we're having a conversation with a real live Catholic ministry professional, Lisa Niebuhr. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, guys. Good morning and welcome.
Lisa, thank you for being on.
It's so good to have you here. Lisa, you are the person who got us on Siouxland Catholic Radio. It's such an honor. We should have had you on sooner.
Well, I am honored to be a part because I love all of the different guests that you've brought on, people from throughout the different dioceses and nationally. So to be invited, thank you so very much.
Yeah, and I see you didn't get the haircut memo, though.
No, I did not. I apologize. I should have brought my husband in with me. He would have fit perfectly.
I love that. For our listeners, if you haven't checked us out on YouTube, Ty and I are very much bald. And Lisa's, no, you're not there yet. So, follow us on YouTube if you haven't got a chance to do that. You can see all the glare off the top of our heads and be delighted. All right. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being with us. We know who you are. We know a little bit about what you do, but we'd love to just get out of the way. Let you tell the listeners about yourself, kind of your story, and then just the ministry that you do with Siouxland Catholic Radio.
Well, gentlemen, for those who know me, I'm originally from Kingsley. I'm a Methodist girl. I grew up in a family in which my mom and my grandmothers were very active in the Methodist Church, had some fabulous friends, not only here in Sioux City, but also in Kingsley who were Catholic. And whenever something happened in our family, my mom was quick to pick up the phone and to say, call Francis, call whomever, and to make sure the Carmelites were praying for us. So always surrounded by great Catholic families, Catholic friends to help us grow closer to Christ. I was involved in Methodist Youth Fellowship. I was involved in the International Order of Rainbow for Girls, which taught girls about the Bible, about the church, and had the opportunity to serve as a statewide brand officer and to be able to be involved in service. I met a young man at college, and my husband, Paul, grew up in Eastern Iowa. He has many family members who were pastors, in part because his grandparents brought the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church from Illinois to Eastern Iowa, and just very strong Missouri Synod Lutheran family. When Paul and I moved back to Northwest Iowa, he wanted to find a school in which he could live his faith. And an opening came about at Galen, and he loved it because he could share his faith as well as to be able to teach music. When I moved from working locally at the Alzheimer's Association to nationally, we had kids in Kingsley, we had kids in Pearson. Paul was living in working in Lamar as I was traveling nationally. And we felt that it was time for a change in our family. And when our daughter came home one night and said, Mom, why is it that a first grade girl can wear a tube top and pants and have her midriff showing? We knew that it was time for change. And so we transferred our kids to Galen. And when the time came when the National Alzheimer's Association staff said, Lisa, you either need to work in the field and find a different job or moved to Chicago, and an opening came to Galen, and it was a great opportunity for me to give back. And so we were active in the Methodist Church, going to Galen. Our kids were going to Mass every weekend at Galen as part of their religion class. And after many times, Jim and Mary Jo Peters said, Lisa and Paul, why don't you think about joining the Catholic Church? And we finally said yes and met privately with Father Kevin for about a semester of RCIA. Our kids said yes. And then we announced that we were joining the church and joined together as a family in 2008. We were supposed to join after Father gave back from Honduras, but my husband auditioned for the Olympic diving team and did not qualify. He fell in an accident. And so we joined as a family during marching band camp. And it was really divine because the band kids who are our family got to be able to be there and join us when we joined the Catholic Church. Paul and I have been involved in the Catholic Church and Catholic schools for years. And for the past 3 years, I have moved from being a volunteer with Siouxland Catholic Radio to now being the listener relations coordinator. And so it's truly divine to be able to bring my experience of outreach and fundraising and marketing, and to be able to share it with Catholic ministry professionals, because I understand the challenges that schools and parishes are facing. So how can the radio station serve alongside, gentlemen, not only you, but others that you serve in getting people closer to Christ?
Yeah, I love that so much. There's so much there that we could just take and run with for like a full conversation. But I love that your conversion to the Catholic faith, your move to join the Catholic Church came about from just a very like plain question. Hey, why don't you guys think about joining the church? I love that. And there sounds like there was a solid relationship that we sometimes forget that needs to be a part of it, right? This relationship that had been built and cultivated with all these people and that invitation to join. And so I just think for all of our listeners, just to remember that this is the fruit of like a lived experience of faith, real relationships that you cultivated, leading then to an opportunity where somebody could just say, "Hey, have you thought about joining the Catholic Church?" That's just such a beautiful, simple witness um, to this transition in your life to move into the faith. And now the fruit of that is that you are in this position where you are directly connected to the proclamation of the gospel across this whole chunk of the United States right here, this tri-state area. How far out does Siouxland Catholic Radio reach?
Well, technically, gentlemen, we cover the earth. And the reason being
Fair
is
enough.
when our tower went down in Jackson in our spring pledge drive, we had some internet problems. Technically, we run from Wayne to Fort Dodge. However, we ran into some internet problems, and both Ann and I said, we're online. You can listen to us on our app. You can listen to us on our internet. And we see every week that there are people listening all over the country and, around the world. And so we truly cover the earth. And John and Ty, back to your comment, it takes building relationships, and it takes planting that seed, asking that question, and cultivating over time. Sometimes I forget you have to ask and ask again and build those relationships before people are ready to say yes to Jesus. And they're not saying no, they're just saying, I'm not ready for that step today. But it's still that constant, as you said, John, that invitation to Christ. We said to our boys, do you want to become pastors and priests? Our youngest discerned a calling to the priesthood and then decided industrial engineering was his calling, but he was still active in the Newman Center at Iowa State. So as we all, and as I get frustrated, Johnny reminded me, keep planting those seeds, asking those questions, so that way you can bear the fruits of your work.
Yeah, and like you said, it's the proclamation of the gospel. Now, because of technology, it's possible to do that all over the planet. And so this great commission, right, to go and make disciples of all nations, like you guys are living that out. You're doing that in a very real way in today's world, and I love that. I'm wondering, can you think of like a story where somebody's life was changed or their heart was really touched? I'm sure you hear those kind of stories all the time, but just for our listeners, just to hear like God really does use these ministries, these communications in a real way where he's impacting hearts and lives to transform them with the love of Jesus Christ. Can you think of like a story off the top of your head that you'd be willing to share?
Yes, I do. Lisa Worth Clays is a Galen graduate. She was a member of the leadership team of the Sioux City Police Department. And her husband, Don, serves with me as a Siouxland Chamber ambassador. And they were a part of our fall pledge drive. Lisa and Don had been sharing that they, like all of us, had a time in which their kids were not actively attending and participating in the church. And instead of being those parents that were nagging, they just constantly and continually planted that seed. And finally, one day, Lisa was listening to Siouxland Catholic Radio, was praying very heartily, and was moved by a particular show. So that night, when she kneeled at the bottom of her bed and said her prayers and said, God, I want my kids to come back to the church, she got a phone call, and her kids came back to the church, and her grandkids were so excited telling her all the fabulous things that they were doing in the church and how, they were active. Grandma and Grandpa, you got to come down and see us. And so, yes, it is those programs, not only those great national programs like Dr. Ray that answers those parenting questions that we all need, but other opportunities for folks to learn, to be able to grow, as well as, programs that are available on demand. You would think that our staff doesn't need them as much because we hope that we are truly those disciples of the church. But when Al Metz had his heart attack and he was trying to rest in his hospital room, he remembered that, yes, I can listen on demand to the chaplet, to the rosary, just like he did at home, but prayed it all night long, providing him that sense of hope and peace and trust and faith that he could get through this. But he felt alone in the darkness of night. And yet Siouxland Catholic Radio brought him that light and that hope that said, you've got through this, Al. Continue to go forth and to spread the gospel to everyone that he meets. And he continues to do so and bring those holy moments to others.
That's beautiful. That's just so great, and we do sometimes we can get lost in sometimes the mundanity of our work, right? The day in, the day out, and we can get um, kind of stuck in our own mindset of wondering if we're making any difference. And it is good to hear that these things, yeah, there's real fruit that's born, and you're lucky that you get to hear some of it, but I'm sure there's even more you don't hear, and so I want to applaud you guys and the work you do. I really think that there is fruit that can be born out of this in ways that people can stumble across a radio station or stumble across a story. And now that it's out there and it's available, that can happen over and over and over again. Now, oh, go
Can
ahead.
I add one piece to it, gentlemen? I am joining Linda Cry, and she serves in a leadership position at a Siouxland Christian School and Church. She is teaching a leadership program at the Chamber. And I invite all of those Catholic ministry professionals to start gathering those stories, those testimonials, and sharing them. As Gary Tillman once said, if you don't pound it from your chest, who will? We all are the modern day St. Gabriel's. So Catholic ministries professionals, start gathering those testimonials and sharing them, because your story might relate to somebody else who will invite somebody to become more involved in the church, to pick up a leadership position, or to invite somebody who hasn't been at church to be involved. So gather those testimonials and then share them and keep spreading them and being the modern day St. Gabriel, like you see behind me.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, we do stories. They've done a lot of studies on this. What actually happens in the brain when a story is told versus information is just given, and so that telling the story, it bridges so many gaps where maybe you're not a great orator, or maybe a person is like for a priest. One of the things I tell priests all the time is if you're not a gifted uh, homilist, if you're not really just naturally gifted, try telling a story instead. Like, don't think so hard about having your intro, your three main points, and your conclusion. Tell the story that makes the point, and that's going to make up for a huge gap sometimes in skill sets, and especially for those who desire to evangelize. Stories cover that gap between your maybe knowledge of the faith or your technical expertise in the process of evangelization. So I think that can be that's such a good point to make, that stories bridge that gap. And so for our Catholic ministry professionals as well, you're getting in front of a group and maybe you don't have those natural skill sets to like get the people rallied. Tell the story. Tell the story, or invite somebody else who has the story to tell their story. And that can build the bridge.
And that sometimes is equally more powerful because they're giving that testimonial. And in today's world in which things cover the earth, everybody knows somebody. We're no longer 3 steps away from the president or 7 steps away from the president. We're now 3 steps away.
Now, I'm wondering, one of the things that we as Catholic ministry professionals are passionate about, the kind of the impetus for this podcast, for this ministry, was that I was experiencing a lot of frustration in my work, and I noticed that a lot of my Catholic ministry professional friends, my colleagues, were experiencing a lot of frustration, and realizing that complaining about things didn't fix them, right? So I'm wondering, you hear from a lot of people, right? You get to build a lot of connections, and I'm sure you hear some of those frustrations. So I'm wondering if we could just speak into those a little bit. What are some of the areas that you hear Catholic ministry professionals getting frustrated in their work of evangelization and in ministry?
Two big things is how do I get things done? Because there's so many different responsibilities, and how do I add in all of these different pieces? And so our ministry here at Siouxland Catholic Radio is to help provide those ancillary things that you can easily add on without a lot of work. We know that an hour sometimes is a short amount of time. So how do you maximize it? And then how can you send home resources to people so that way they can be able to use it on demand? You can't crunch everything in an hour, but if you can continually drop pieces of information or provide ongoing resources and supports to people, it helps them to be able to grow in their faith as well as to connect to one another. Children right now, big youth, are probably the area that we're hearing the most about, because youth are looking for more than just information. They're looking for those stories, those testimonials, those beautiful pieces of music, and ways that which they can share their faith. And it's really neat with Blessed Carlo, Venerable Carlo, becoming that first millennial saint, that we can be able to say, oh, here is somebody that they can easily relate to. Sometimes on a feast day like of St. John the Baptist, how do you relate to that? But Blessed Carlo is one of those people. And so by providing, parishes, the Eucharistic miracle banners that they can use at any time, plus videos for young people, videos for their older students, tools and resources, things that are available in multiple languages too, that you can print out the different banners. It's been a great blessing to be able to give back to Catholic ministries professionals and to let them know that we're not here to take away from them, but our goal is to support them in their ministry, to make their load a little bit lighter and to provide them connections too. And it's been amazing, from Gayville Vollen to Jackson and out to Wakefield and even here in Sioux City, those opportunities to connect people and build those resources and to use the Missouri River and the interstate as that connector instead of that border and saying things stop here. We have that great flexibility to cover and to bring people together in a unique way too.
So how do you kind of source that out in terms of what materials to create, or what direction you go, or do you just kind of, is there an opportunity, like if a DRE is listening to this episode, can they just reach out to you and say, hey, do you have any resources for XYZ? And then where does that conversation go? Like how does that kind of unfold?
You know what? Great question. People can reach out to us anytime. We are here to come to you, whether that's via phone, via Zoom, via meeting in person, and to really sit down, gentlemen, and to begin a conversation and to build that relationship and say, what are you looking for? What are you needing? How can we be of help? For example, the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage, when it was coming to Winnebago, I reached out to Father Barron and said, Father, how can we best serve you? And he said, Lisa, we'd love your help in promotion. Well, then the conversation began, well, how can we get it to YouTube so that way folks in the nursing home? Sarah Snake's mom is not doing very well. Sarah is an elder in the Winnebago tribe. We've broadcast things on YouTube and we've expanded things to Facebook Live. So we live streamed the Eucharistic Pilgrimage procession. Then they needed some beautiful music from the sisters. So we reached out to the Lim sisters and said to Sister Genevieve, what can you be able to have? And then they asked for, can we bring in the Knights of Columbus? So it's great to be able to say we're blessed with so many friends and relationships. And yet there are relationships and friends we haven't yet met. And so to know that you can pick up the phone, to call, we can have that conversation, see what we can provide and what we can't provide. Who are the people that we can connect you to, or who do you know? Gentlemen, just like a young lady down in Ottawa, I told her about one of your recent shows and said, John and Ty have all the things you need, complete their free assessment, and then be able to reach out to them, and you would be able to help them with your experience, whether working at the diocesan level, at the parish level, or working with other parishes, to be able to say, here's the different things that we have to offer. Another thing that we've heard is gentlemen, there is a decline in the number of priests, the women religious, and the deacons. And we've been having a conversation. When do we start a show telling those vocation stories? I went to the EWTN conference, and they were telling that is a wonderful way to build relationships, as well as to plant those seeds to be able to say, oh yes, Father Dan's story relates to me, or Sister Genevieve's story. And so we launched that show, and it's available on demand online. But that's because of you and those conversations of saying, Lisa, we need to have the show on demand, because we all can't stop Thursdays at 3:20 to hear the show, but we want to be able to hear it and hear it in entirety. So you help shape our long-range strategic plan, and your input to our board and our staff helps us be able to respond to you. So please know we're here to serve you. Our goal is to help make your load lighter and getting people to heaven.
Awesome. Lisa, I just want to pick your brain a bit. I know you've dropped a ton of nuggets here. I love that
Sorry.
that one of the frustrations that is being brought forward is like, how do I get things done? We talk about it at length with I forget which episode number, but it deals with the 4 disciplines of execution. So I invite our listeners to go and check that episode out. What other best practices as far as communications, because that's the line of work that you're in communicating the gospel and this, the saving grace of our Lord. What are some best practices for communications when somebody's coming to you that is struggling with maybe just connecting with their parish members, or even their team? What are some best practices as far as communicating maybe a vision or a goal?
First of all, guys, never see anything as a problem. It's a challenge. If you see something as a problem, it's going to be 1 + 1 = 2. And this is the only answer you're ever going to be able to come with. If you think about something as a challenge, it invites that creativity of your team, yourself, to be able to think outside of that proverbial box. So first of all, think of it as a challenge. Think about your strengths. Think about those weaknesses, those opportunities and threats, and then kind of lay out, like we do, an annual operations plan that says, what are the 3 to 4 things that I want to work on? And then to be able to say, who are the people? You don't want to do it all, gentlemen, because if you do it all, other people aren't going to be excited and engaged. Galen Ball, perfect example. We had gotten to the point one year where it was 1 general chair, 1 general co-chair, 1 marketing person, etc. But we didn't have enough people to be able to grow it. And so we doubled our team. There are also those people that can only give an hour. So ask people, how much can they do? What is their area of expertise? And what do they want to do? The last thing you want to do is to ask somebody to be a speaker, etc. And that's not their gift. Find out what it is and to find out how much talent, but then start building your base. You need to be available on demand. I never thought Siouxland Catholic Radio would be on YouTube. And yet we create those little video snippets, that 20-second tease of a picture, a story, the highlights that captures people's attention and say, yes, I love this, and now I want to listen to the show. Make things available on demand, on your website, on your blogs, on your YouTube pages, etc. Showcase the best and ask your DREs, ask your parents to take those pictures and to share those with you and those stories, and then to lay out a plan. And to know, gentlemen, sometimes you think this is the best plan, and you get to that last minute and God says, I got you this far, but I want you to think of things in a different way and to be open to God's graces. You gentlemen reminded me the other day that it's not about the numbers, it's about the quality of hearts. And sometimes with planned giving, I've hoped that 60 people will come and you get 3 great people. And it's those 3 hearts that you've changed that are now going to go out and be your megaphones. And so never be disappointed by the numbers, but just keep planting that seed. Find the different ways that you can reuse your content. You don't have to always go out and recreate content. Keep sharing, keep telling the story, and go out and spend time in a coffee shop. That hour of networking and building, or sitting with somebody in the pew, even after Mass for a few minutes, is sometimes more important than some of the other work that we have to do.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that we got to keep telling stories. When you read the Gospels, it's all about stories. That's how Jesus taught. That's how I think our Judeo-Christian roots, the Jewish roots, you know, thousands of years ago, they didn't write anything down. It was all stories. It was all question and answers. The youngest asking the eldest of, how did we do things? What is the Passover? That's how the Passover starts, is by having that youngest in the family asking the eldest, what is the Passover? And starts the story over and over and over again. And I think that's where we've kind of lost um our zeal, so to speak. When you get those converts, i.e., me, telling their story, people get inspired, and inspiration leads to great things. So I'm glad you're mentioning these stories and just being able to reiterate and retell the story. Now, I will admit, I get tired of telling my own story, so that's why I like to seek out other people's stories. I love the Coming Home Network. I love hearing all the different conversion stories. So I appreciate you bringing up and mentioning that we got to tell more stories and we got to tell it more frequently.
Another thing, gentlemen. Oops, sorry. Go ahead, John.
No, no, no. I want to hear from you.
Another quick thing. I'm going to talk about our art festival. My husband and I, as you all know, there are many ways you talk about those beautiful stories that we share sacred art through music, whether it's vocally, instrumentally, etc. Our art festival has gone bigger and bolder and better than I could ever imagine. And the kids the first year created pictures of the Blessed Mother and created pictures of Saint Gabriel and the angels and saints. But this year, they really knocked it out of the park when they created their pictures of the saints. And gentlemen, some of them, like the kids up at Spalding, took a piece of tinfoil, covered a piece of cardboard, took a marker, drew the stained glass windows in their church, then cut out the construction to cover like the outside of the frame. But it took simple things such as tinfoil, a marker, and cardboard to be able to create a piece of art in which they told the story of the saints and the saints in the church. So think about art. Don't think you have to put a lot of money into it, because sometimes the best are just using the basic resources that we have and to be able to share that also.
I love that. Actually, I feel like one thing that I keep hearing, kind of hear it coming out as you're talking continually, is the stories, right? Like Ty mentioned, the stories and the way we share them. And it doesn't have to be uh, big and flashy. For example, these kids are using these simple materials. They're making this art, but then you're sharing what they're doing, and that ignites them in a certain way. And I think in the same way, you had mentioned earlier, have your parents take pictures at these events and find ways to share them. That's so simple. That doesn't cost anything. Everybody loves to showcase the awesome things their kids are doing. They love to share it, and then when they share it, then their families see it, and that picture shares the story of what Jesus is doing in your community as they're participating in these events. And so again, really simple things, really practical things that allow us to share this mission, to share what God is doing here in our own community. And you don't have to break the bank. You don't have to, come up with the new flashy whatever it might be. You just have to share what God is doing and find simple ways to do that.
The prayers we did for Vacation Bible School when the kids came in, we filled the void one year. There wasn't Vacation Bible School after the pandemic. We had kids come and just share a 30-second prayer on the radio station. Who are kids in your religious ed programs that can share a prayer? All you need is your cell phone. Record it and share it. Because the minute you touch a child's life, it touches a parent's life, it touches a grandparent's life. It ignites a donor who's wondering about the future of the church. And there's where the potential leaders in the parish are going to be there. The kids like Brittany Junk's little boy, who was so excited that nobody, sometimes we have to break the rules. And Deacon Joe Twidwell said we didn't have any servers, and he would train this young man who was a first grader or second grader. Brittany shared his story, and now more kids are excited. Well, I want to help and be a server. And grandparents were excited, saying the church is alive. Just because nobody was there meant that they had been at the 8:30 Mass this morning because it was Father's Day and they wanted to go to brunch afterwards. But think outside of the box. You don't have to break the bank. And then afterwards, gentlemen, a written thank you. I've always believed in a written thank you. I write them. I don't like to type them. Yes, sometimes I will email them. But a written thank you speaks volumes. That small amount of postage will garner returns for future people to step forward and say thank you, and add a picture. Maybe it's a postcard with pictures of your event so donors can be able to see the return on their investment, their return on your support, whether they're volunteers, whether they're giving dollars, whether they helped in the last minute, and then write a handwritten note on there that says, if it weren't for you, this wouldn't happen, and then share that little story.
Yeah, I think you're kind of speaking into this next question that I want to ask a little bit already, and that's that there is a reality that you had mentioned earlier, right? You might have a donor luncheon or a donor event and hope for 60, and you might have 3 show up. That there's this reality that just like our parishes, right? All ministries, there's the spiritual side. It's mainly a spiritual work, but there is also a practical side, right? You need to have money to keep the lights on, to keep the infrastructure in place, to maintain the buildings, to do all that stuff. How do you guys balance that idea of that it's not about the numbers, but also the numbers matter? How do you balance the spiritual side of ministry with the practical side?
Lisa Niebuhr, am not perfect in that, because there are times that I come back and say, we only had X number. And yet then I look and see, oh yes, after one of our events in which we had a smaller group, I discovered this young lady had worked with her professional, and her insurance professional said, yes, we are working with this family and they are going to be doing this, and shared how they are using their IRA dollars to leave a gift for the church besides their kids. So we're all going to feel, and we're all going to hear the devil saying on one shoulder, you only had so many. But it is that constant invitation that you bring in the 3 best today and maybe 6 tomorrow. But if you hadn't had those 3 people in there, where would those megaphones be? And sometimes you need to qualify, and you start with a smaller pool, try it out, figure out what works, what doesn't work, modify it, change it, etc., and then bring in the best people. But always inviting people in, showcase the work that you're doing. Invite a student to tell their story about what they did in religious ed. Invite a parent to be able to say, here's what my kids learned in our Catholic schools. Always putting, if not yourself, Ty, like you said, somebody else to be able, and sometimes it's better. Assess your demographics. At Galen, I always said, I need somebody from Neptune and Struble and Lamar's and Merrill, etc. But look at your demographics, or even to be able to say recently, we've got somebody from the funeral home, from the plan giving, etc. And to be able to put that demographics together and say, are we hitting all of the audiences? And then to always come back, just like teachers do, reassess what you've done, tweak it and make it better, and find the best, and then run forth and do it again. And maybe it's going to be a while. Maybe you're going to put away in your pocketbook and save it for another day, but keep coming back to those things that work well, modify it, and then take it to the next level.
That's awesome. Lisa, as a listener relations director, you probably get to talk to a lot of people, hear their wins, hear some of the frustrations. So, can you just kind of brag on somebody of where you're really seeing their work be fruitful? This is just share where ministry is being done really well.
When you asked that, I wrote down a couple of folks. Philip Grothaus, St. Francis of Assisi, had the opportunity to get to meet him at Sacred Heart in Boone, and is doing some fabulous work, building relationships, bringing in new things at their parish, working with kids, etc. Christ Our Life. They really, you talk about Ellen and where they're going. They're traveling and they've got literally like parish pals, that they've got key people or key individuals in certain communities that they go to and say, this is what we're doing. And will you share that information? And I think that's important for all of us, whether we're working on something statewide, or just within our parish. Identify those key stakeholders and give them the information and share it out. If you haven't been to the Latino Enrollment Institute at Notre Dame, you need to, because those strategies of reaching other communities, whether it's the Latino community, you can apply it elsewhere to be able to think outside of the box. How can you be able to be where people are at and to be able to understand where they're coming forth, so that way you can bring your ideas together. Just because it works for one particular group doesn't mean it's going to work for others. So you need to understand those stories. And then the other group is that National Eucharistic Revival of picking strategically communities. You know, they were in an African-American church Saturday morning before they came to Winnebago on June 22nd, and a parish in a community that is very strong in 3 different Indian Native tribes. And Father Barron brought in folks from all 3 tribes. From St. Mike South Sioux, brought in the radio station, brought in the Lim Sisters. Those type of opportunities, invite various groups in, invite new groups to the table, ask them what they want to do, and then give them those responsibilities and go forth. And then gentlemen, you too, because you are a great resource for people to turn to, that I'm looking for volunteers, I'm looking for strategies for educating people, I'm looking for Father Barron to talk about fueling our faith. It's important to sometimes remember, like Mother Teresa said, just begin 1, 1, and 1. And of course, when I say that, I can't help but not think of Mr. Siebert and Mission Honduras, and then Feed Just One out of Lamar's too. But so many different groups. I could spend the entire show bragging about everybody.
Yeah, it can be really easy to forget just how much God is real. Jesus wants these efforts at ministry to be successful, to be fruitful, and we can forget that it's not all on us. Like, God really is working all things for good. He really is uh, in there, that ground, that soil that we're cultivating. He is making the seeds grow, and so we can get frustrated in the day to day. But it's so good to hear, and you have your ear to the ground. You have so many conversations with so many people all over the place, and to say, yes, there is fruit. God is building. The mission of the church is alive and well and happening. That is so good for my soul to hear. That's so good for my heart to be able to hear that. I appreciate that. I'm wondering if
Uh-huh.
if you had the attention of the whole world for 90 seconds, I'm wondering what you would say. As somebody who is in that mission field of communication, of broadcasting the gospel, if you had the attention of the whole world for 90 seconds, what would you say?
Ladies and gentlemen, how can you turn an ordinary moment into an extraordinary moment? Think about this. Deacon Paul Gangler had these great big palm crosses that I loved, that were beautiful, but they were large for my hand. And so when I met Al Metz, he's like, Lisa, I can get you some small palm crosses. And he had them blessed. And everywhere we go, we leave a palm cross with someone. Somebody that's been crying, somebody that's celebrating laughter, somebody that's having a difficult time, whatever. We are trying to find ways with those simple palm crosses that are blessed to help people turn an ordinary challenge or an ordinary moment into an extraordinary moment. That's what we all are called to do, to find the ordinary and to make it extraordinary, to keep planting those seeds, to look at what's best around you and then find out how you can make it your own, and then run forth and don't stop trying. Just because the door isn't open, don't be afraid to look around and find those windows, and then jump forth with gladness and excitement and run and keep spreading the gospel to everyone, everywhere.
Beautiful. Lisa, this conversation has been awesome. And generally, we will bring on, the people from different walks of life that can help in this ministry with these Catholic professionals. Who do you think would be a great guest on our next episode?
Yes, I have several ideas for you. Um,
As I knew you would.
I think, gentlemen, I'd like you to visit with Michelle Rethman down in Ottawa. She did pizza with Padres. Michelle brought in Father Crotty one night and served to the religious at pizza, and the kids had all open time to visit with Father. They ran over an hour over, and parents were getting upset, and they were calling Michelle. And Michelle said, "Okay, kids, it's time to go. Your parents are leaving or wanting to go home." So think about pizza with Padres and visiting with Michelle Rethman. Another place is Catholic United Financial's end of life seminar. Gentlemen, we all know that there is a time for us to come and a time for us to become and to answer God's call and to come to heaven. I love the end of life seminar because it gives priests that opportunity to answer those questions about, do I need a feeding tube? My sister-in-law is battling cancer. It was great to be able to have that resource to be able to say yes. With esophageal cancer, a feeding tube is okay. But to be able to have those wonderful conversations, to know where the church says it exactly from the catechism, and to be able to plan the future with your families. You can make the same amount of decisions in 72 hours planning your funeral as you will make planning your wedding. So have those wonderful and fruitful conversations now, so that way you can go forth and enjoy life and enjoy the beautiful moments when God calls us to eternal life. Another thing is the Fire Foundation of Northwest Iowa is working on a sacramental preparation program. Every child is talented and gifted in one area, and every child, like our youngest, was not talented and gifted in every area. And so the Fire Foundation is working on providing some opportunities to help DREs serve those kids with a variety of learning and other disabilities. And then the National Catholic Partnership on Disabilities. I volunteer for the Fire Foundation because of our youngest, and it's been great to be able to find those additional resources, those trainings for DREs and teachers, because we can better be able to serve all of God's children. And some of those children are 18 and older that are having some difficulties too. So those resources can be deployed in some different ways. So great resources.
Well, Lisa, this has been a great conversation. As always, if you're not connected with Lisa on LinkedIn, you need to be, because she shares from pretty much everywhere, all the people that she's connected with. So she's a great source of information. Thank you for being on the podcast. Is there any way other than LinkedIn that our listeners can connect with you to support your ministry?
You bet, gentlemen. We invite you to follow us online at www.siouxlandcatholicradio.com. We are on Facebook, on Instagram, a little bit on Threads. And of course, we are on YouTube. You can find our shows on Spotify, a variety of different podcasting platforms. And I forgot the most important thing, gentlemen. If you have an opportunity, like our friends in Odeboll and Ida Grove, and you've got an activity going on in your church, will you reach out to us? Because we would love to visit with you about being a guest on Faith in Action. As you know, Faith in Action airs Mondays at 9, Saturdays at 7, and on demand everywhere. But it's a great hour-long program in which we connect listeners to your different programs and providing that community programming for you that you can't find anywhere else. So please give Joanne a call too.
All right, great. Thank you, Lisa, for being on the podcast. And thank you.
God bless you.
You bet. And thank you, dear listeners, for listening to the Catholic Ministry Professionals podcast. If you want to transform your parish through your work, but you're not sure where to start, you can download our free parish health assessment at catholicministryprofessionals.com/free free assessment. It's just 36 questions. It only takes about 5 minutes. And afterward, you will have a color-coded picture of your parish's health that you can use to fuel better conversations, prioritize better work, and become a better leader. You can email us at catholicminpros@gmail.com to share feedback or request a free consultation. And finally, don't forget to text this episode to a priest or a friend in ministry that can benefit from it.
And with that, we'll see you in the vineyard.